So you may have noticed by now that electronic drum companies have this obsession with taking every acoustic drum and accessory on the market and making alternate reality electronic versions of the same thing. So that's how we get stuff like the electronic cajon, the electronic cowbell, the electronic handpan, the electronic moon gel, electronic drum wizard wands. But one accessory that I was reminded that exists in the realm of electronic drums recently is what I'm going to call electronic drum mutes. So electronic drum mutes do exactly what you would expect. You put these pads on top of the drums, and now you're practicing quietly, but you're also getting all the benefits of a regular electronic drum set. The latest competitor in this space is a Chinese company called Headphone. Now, the point of this video isn't to promote this individual product, because unfortunately the module's not very good, the triggering is bad, and the sound quality is bad. But I'm more interested in the whole category, because on paper it seems like it solves a lot of problems at once, is supposed to be a temporary thing for acoustic drummers who don't always want to play electronic drums. They just need to practice quietly every once in a while. Maybe every once in a while their band needs them to lay down MIDI tracks, or maybe you just don't want to have to change your muscle memory. Because a lot of beginner electronic drums, or more affordable electronic drums, they require you to play in very small pads and more cramped space and have the cymbals positioned a little bit different than you're used to. This just has a ton of benefits on paper. Something that could be as useful as a Yamaha E8010 or a set of R-toms with Zelda L80s. It's even in that same price range. This is $600 right now. The problem, though, is that nobody actually cares about electronic drum mutes. There have been 30 years of attempts from companies you've heard of and probably haven't heard of, and no one really cares most of the time. Now, you can blame it on a million different things. There's going to be a lot we're going to talk about in today's video, but I want to figure out what's gone wrong, what has gone right in some cases, and is there a way to make this so useful that everybody's got to buy it? Is that even possible? Let's find out. Today's video is brought to you by Edrum Center. If you're shopping for electronic drums, go give Edrum Center a shot. They're a great drum store based in Tennessee that just focuses on electronic drums. Go check out my discount link to them in the description below. Again, that's Edrum Center. Use the discount link below. Okay, so let's see where all this started, at least as far as I can tell. So Concept 1 came out with these set of pads that go on top of acoustic drum heads in 1994. You can already see the bones of what all the other companies would do right here. These were single-zone drum and cymbal pads with a rubber playing surface and plastic on the bottom. The cymbals were functionally the same as the drum pads, but with a stand mount in the center. They also sold a single-zone dual sensor version of the pads called the Headbanger. Basically, for redundancy, it had two outputs. The bright red color isn't really a marketing thing, although that, inevitably happens. It came from using Linatex rubber from Malaysia. It's not the cheapest component, and neither was Concept 1. $670 for the pads, plus $160 for each cymbal, meaning that a full setup was roughly $2,400 adjusted for inflation. And that's without the module. You still had to go buy that from somewhere else. Hey, at least you got a travel bag though. So next up were the Simmons Services Streamline trigger pads that came out in 1996, or roughly around that time. Same idea as Concept 1, but a key difference is that you got cymbal mutes instead of cymbal pads. Honestly, that was pretty smart because you didn't have to switch out your acoustic cymbals for electronic and then do that in reverse when you wanted to go back. It lowers setup and teardown time. It also used curly cables, which you don't see every day. Price tag was $637 for a full set of everything, or roughly $1,294 adjusted for inflation. By the way, this is not the Simmons company you're probably thinking of. Simmons Services was a kinda sorta spin-off company, a Simmons repair shop in California that was only around for a few years. And then in 1996, we have the Leon pads. This was shown off at the 1996 NAMM convention, I believe more as a proof of concept rather than an announcement that we have a deal at Musician's Friend or something. I don't think this really got up off the ground, but it was definitely a thing briefly. So next up, we got the Traps E-Pad system in 2009. Now, because of that giant time gap, Traps had no idea that other drum mutes ever happened, so they kind of thought they invented the whole idea, and they leaned on that in their marketing. Once again, we got single-zone cymbals and a set of single-zone power pads, foam on the bottom, ABS plastic, and a rubber inlay on top. The Traps E450 module powered everything. By the way, they didn't make this or design it. It was a popular OEM module from, you guessed it, Medeli. Price tag was about $1,000 or 450 pounds. Believe it or not, Traps still shows this entire system on their website, and it's not a mistake. They even advertised it on their Facebook in 2022. Good luck finding a set though, because the major dealers in North America and Europe don't actually carry this on their websites. So if you're dying to play this, you'd have to go buy it from the company directly. Then in 2012, we've got the Aquarian on head pads. So this was kind of an odd system. You had to clip a booster box on the rim of your acoustic drum to boost the signal because it's not a piezo. And then you'd have to go buy cymbals from somewhere else and then go buy a module from somewhere else and then cobble together this whole system. I liked this because the playing surface is fantastic. I really liked playing this when I got a chance to see it at Sweetwater Gear Fest back in the day. But the problem is it didn't come with all the stuff, and they were all single zone. You'd have to go buy a separate rim shot zone, and they were initially promoting this with Zildjian Gen 16 cymbals before everybody realized that was a bad idea. So it was kind of like a cool half-baked concept that never really got off the ground. And then later, apparently Miditronics decided to distribute this through alternate mode instead. So now it was sold with black heads, a different kick drum sensor, and a combo booster box called the FTB. This is still on the alternate mode website to this day. I should probably also mention that Pearl was around in the 2010s with something called True Track pads. This isn't exactly in the same category that I'm trying to cover in this video because this was more of a conversion system that required you to remove your heads entirely and put the system in its place. But it was kind of like a competitor that came with metal cymbals at first and then rubber cymbals, and there were two versions of the rubber hi-hats. Pearl sold this in a lot of different configurations for many, many years and seemed to have gotten at least a moderate bit of success with that system. And then we got Infused in 2015, which in my opinion was the best attempt at a system like this because it was very well-rounded. You got a set of pads that matched whatever drum sizes that you own. They sat on the rims of your drums, so they weren't going to slide around on your drum head if your toms are like at a more extreme angle. They came with very large cymbals. And in 2015, cymbal sizes like this, rubber cymbals that size, that was extremely, extremely rare. It also came with a kick drum that went on your acoustic kick drum. That was great. I liked the implementation of that. And the module was also very forward-thinking as well. So it had a version of BFD for it, which is kind of like basically what the Elisa Strata is doing, just a more dumbed-down approach. You'd like design kits on your computer and then use a USB stick to transfer those kits over to the module. It was a tad complicated. It got a little bit too into the weeds, but I liked what they were trying to do. But if I had to guess why it crashed and burned and why they never made a version 2, it's probably due to the fact that they charged too high of a price, and people are only willing to spend a certain amount of money for a rubber pad system. And I feel like they just, crossed that line of how much money people are willing to spend for a system like this. The next company I want to bring up that is kind of in this vein is Artom. Now, this is not a new product from them because they've been selling these raised rims with a single ply mesh head and a patch on top. Great system for practicing quietly without having to remove your acoustic heads. You just put this on top of your drums. Great idea. But they get in the conversation in 2022 because they start selling these clip-on triggers that go on the rims, so it turns them into electronic pads. I really like this idea, and I feel like it's a nice add-on to what they were already selling, but it's not going to have like a long-term impact in the sense we're trying to talk about in this video because they don't sell it as a turnkey system with the cymbals, with a module, and a nicer like dual zone trigger system. So it's a nice add-on, but that's pretty much where it's probably going to stay long-term. And then of course we have the latest attempt at something like this, and that's Heylun or Heylun. It's a little bit tricky. I don't really know how to pronounce the name of this company. Sorry to say. So these are the smart Edrum pads, which cost $600 on AliExpress. These are really not that expensive. You're getting the snare, the toms, a kick drum pad that's like a dedicated pad on the ground, plus a full set of cymbals and the module included. You don't even need to put them on the acoustic drums if you don't want. You can actually just put these on individual stands, as you can see from this photo right here. And if you want to buy these from worlddrummers.com, they sell their own version of this. They're probably, importing them from Heylun, but with their logo on them. They're selling the cymbals as the Black Knight cymbals and the smart pads as the smart pads. And I don't think worlddrummers.com sells the module separately, which is kind of understandable. I wouldn't really recommend this system because the triggering is bad and I don't see a way to change the trigger settings, and the sound quality is pretty bad. So you can't use it with a VST because the triggering is weird and the built-in sounds aren't great either. The drum pads though, they're not half bad as far as I can tell. If you want an in-depth review of just the snare, the kick, and the tom pads, go check out this video by My Favorite Drum Gear. He really breaks down all the pros and cons incredibly in depth over there. Okay, so now that we've sort of skipped through all the different versions we've seen over the years, what have we learned? Well, the first thing is, this whole concept has never been popular. even though a lot of companies have taken a crack at it. Also, you'll notice that no big companies ever sort of jump into the space. There has never been a Roland version of this idea, or a Yamaha version of this idea, or an Alesis version of this idea. The first problem with electronic drum mutes is the pricing. Companies keep forgetting that at the end of the day, these are accessories. They're temporary pads that give you the benefits of eDrums, and then you remove them. So you can't charge $2,000, but that's what companies keep trying to do. I can't tell you the exact dollar amount that people are willing to spend on something like this, but there is an imaginary line, and when you cross that barrier, people say, forget it, I'll just buy a TD17 instead. The next thing is, a lot of companies don't want to sell a turnkey system, or they don't have the capability to do it. I don't think this can be successful if you're only selling a snare and a set of tom pads and a kick drum pad. You also have to sell the cymbals, and you have to sell the module. You can't get away with only selling one or two parts of the system, and then force your customers to run all over the internet buying the rest of it. That just doesn't work. Also, a lot of people don't want to play on rubber anymore, which again is why I say you got to keep this very, very cheap. Otherwise, if you need to sell your product for $2,000, Enfuse needs to sell it for $2,000 or whatever, adjusted for inflation, then they would have had to make a mesh version of that system. Although at that point in time, they couldn't because of the mesh head patent in the United States and Japan. But for real though, mesh heads are kind of a must-have anymore. Even if you take a look at Amazon, there are mesh pad electronic drums for $200. Now, at that price, they're no better than a rubber pad electronic drum set, but it's showing you what the market wants. People are just tired of rubber pads. It feels very 80s and 90s-ish. Even just making a rubber pad system is already taking a giant risk in today's day and age. And then finally, to keep the price down low enough, I feel like the module needs to be figured out. Some companies make the module so fancy that they have to charge too much. So I think Enfuse made their module too nice, and they had to pay for the licensing of the software. So that's one of the reasons I think why their system had to be as expensive as it was. Meanwhile, some companies don't put enough effort into the module, and it brings the whole system down, like that Chinese company Headphone. So the module needs to be good enough to work and sound okay and generate clean MIDI if you want to use it with plugins, but it can't be so good that it makes you have to charge $2,000 for the system. There needs to be a delicate balance there. Now let's talk about big picture. Like, is there actually any potential in electronic drum mutes as a whole category? Is there a way to make this a really, really cool must-have accessory for acoustic drums that everybody sees as valuable and like a bunch of companies could pile in if somebody figures out the formula? To be honest, anything is possible, but I just don't see this as being something that everybody should focus on. I know I made a whole video about it, but like the reason why I'm making a video is that every 2 to 5 years, a brand new company shows up, tries to make it happen, and it doesn't happen. We've had 30 years of attempts, and it hasn't worked, probably for a decent reason. It's one of those kinds of concepts where it seems good on paper, but in reality, not enough people really care about it. But that's my take. Let me know if I'm right or wrong down in the comments. Is there a way to make this happen? Or should little companies stop trying and failing over and over again to make this happen? Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.